much of love drives a man insane. You broke my will, but what a thrill. Goodness gracious, great balls of fire.
Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony.
Isn't that Jerry Lee Lewis?
Jerry Lee Lewis.
Causing a riot on stage.
As he was wont to do.
Yeah,
yes.
That's right.
Hey, thanks for joining us, folks. This is Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We've got a lot of great topics that we're covering today. We're going to be turning our attention to the state of Colorado. They've gone back and forth on what's needed to understand and to be able to see well-managed homeowner associations in that state. One person has an opinion piece that we're going to be talking about shortly, that what the state needs is an HOA court.
That's what he thinks.
Yeah. And we'll be talking about that. And in just shortly, too, we'll be beginning to address a number of questions that our listeners have written to us about. Which just brings up, how do you get something on the show? How do you bring something that you'd like us to address? I will throw that over to you, Tony.
Sure. We want you to call our hotline, 952-224-2668. Leave us a message with questions, comments, ideas for topics, anything that's on your mind or anything that's raised by what we're talking about on the show. Call the hotline, 952-224-2668, and leave us a message.
That's right. And one other thing before we get going here, too, on our next story, just a reminder to our listeners in the first hour, we've got a great resource for you. It's something we want to give away free. It's our bi-monthly newsletter. A lot of the topics we cover on the show, we cover in further detail. We have a lot of our guests that have been on the show that write for it as well. We have thousands of people who comment and say, this is wonderful. Keep this coming. We've been doing it for a number of years. I mean, we have, I think, over 23,000 now on that are subscribed.
Wow.
All you need to do to be the next person, to be 23,001, would be to give us a call during the week at New Concepts, 952-922-2500. Ask for Courtney, and she'll make sure that you start receiving your next subscription. Well, let's delve into the next story, and this is talking about what Colorado needs. And they have been very pendulous, haven't they, over the last year and a half, Tony?
Yeah.
You know, they legislators there said, hey, we're hearing concerns, therefore that means we got to write a law.
Yeah.
And so then they created a little over a year and a half ago, they first created what was a special department, wasn't it, just to deal with receiving calls, questions, complaints about HOAs.
That's right. Which seemed to make sense. They created what I thought was going to be a temporary agency just to collect these concerns
to see how bad things are,
to find out if there was a need for more.
That's right. And from that, I think they said then there was concerns. Legislators said, one of the top concerns is transparency. When we talked about that on the show months ago, though, it was interesting that the percentage of homeowners actually complaining, saying that something was wrong, was 1/16 of 1/100 of 1%. It was
infinitesimal.
Exactly.
Am I saying that right?
Yes.
It was so tiny compared to the number of people that actually live in associations in Colorado that, to me, it just absolutely illustrated there's no need for any more regulation.
Yes, and so what happens, and here's a person who wrote an opinion piece to the Denver Post, kind of backing that idea, because of people that are wanting to see more legislation, wanting to see more regulation in our industry, are saying the way that can be accomplished is through an ombudsman office, or in this case, they're calling it an HOA court of sorts. Where there is the idea is that because things are unruly, people should be able to have a place where they can go to quickly, inexpensively, and be able to hear something heard and decided on, and their lives are better, and they move on. It's a great idea.
You know what? It just dawned on me.
Yeah.
This sounds very similar to housing court in Hennepin County or Ramsey County, which I bet started in exactly the same way. Someone said there are so many complaints about landlords, we need a special court set aside.
Because we can't have conciliation court. That's not
we
enough,
can't
right?
use what we've already got, I guess. So now we have housing court, which is expensive to go to, which is very time-consuming. So I don't think an HOA court is going to turn out to be an easier, less expensive route in settling disputes.
Yeah. And I guess, what it comes down to in this whole idea, if people feel that there's a need for an ombudsman office or an HOA court, and I think there's 14 different states that do and have one instituted where they are. I hope that does not happen here in Minnesota. I don't think it's needed. But I think it's based on what I would call a utopian idea. And that's what this is based on. The idea here is that the person who wrote this opinion piece said they would like to see a type of HOA court, if you will, in which problems could be addressed, resolved expeditiously and inexpensively, without the need of hiring attorneys and going to civil court. While we're thinking about it, I'd like stamps made out of taffy so that they taste good when you lick them and put them on the envelope. And I would like,
and you'd like them to be free. Right?
Oh yeah, and so I mean, I say that tongue in cheek, of course, but I mean, the idea is the idea of trying to create our society where that is going to be free of these things, or is really unrealistic. It's not really looking at the way human nature is, because even though you may have something like you said, we have what's it called, unlawful detainer court, right?
Housing court.
Housing court. Now, the idea was to start out. It was inexpensive, but as things go, it gets more and more complicated and more and more costly. Not less, right?
That's right. That's right.
And so the idea that creating something like this is, I think, really unrealistic.
Well, I think it's going to have exactly the opposite effect. And what we've experienced as property managers and what Colorado has experienced with their agency is that most of the concerns and complaints that come in from homeowners are unfounded. It's because of they don't understand what they bought when they bought into their association, or they don't understand their governing documents, or they don't take the time to understand the process. We know that most issues raised by owners fall into that category. So once you weed those out, you've got this infinitesimal number of issues that even need to be addressed.
So what are we saying with that as a society then? Are we saying that we cannot trust individuals to be adult enough to take the time to understand what it is that they've purchased, to understand how they're supposed to act and relate? I mean, the same thing too. We people always want to talk about their rights and their privileges, but people so often forget to talk about their responsibilities.
That's exactly true, isn't it?
I mean, in our first story, that was the case. The people that are going to be protesting NATO and are going to be doing so violently.
Exercising their right.
Because they've seen that so often in so many other cities. Now it's displacing thousands of people.
That's right.
Along State Street with high-rise condominiums. But there's no thought of that because their right supersedes, I guess, the right of anybody else. Yeah. And it's unfortunate to see that take place, and I think that is what is going to happen here. How do you address that? How do you get people to understand,
take care of themselves?
Yes.
Well, they think they are taking care of themselves in this way by being very vocal in their disagreement and by getting special assistance. I see it as they're asking for special help from the state. They go to their legislator and they say, I'm upset I can't plant a flagpole in front of my townhouse, so you need to pass a new law. And then off the legislation goes to passing a new law and regulating what's already regulated by governing documents and by real estate law in general. To me, it's all about people who aren't getting what they want. They're getting no for an answer, and they won't settle for that.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about this opinion piece that was written in the Denver Post about a week or so ago, even though this guy comes to the conclusion that there needs to be an HOA court, when you read everything that he has said prior to that, you realize that freedom of speech does not necessarily mean that you must have a coherent thought pattern.
He's exercising his freedom of speech.
He's exercising his freedom of speech, most definitely.
Yeah.
But there's a whole nother issue that he wants to talk about. What is that, you ask? It's the idea of licensing for managers.
That's right.
And we're going to talk about that after these messages.